Cassian Andor is out here on this sketchy industrial planet called Morlana 1, trying to find his long-lost sister. Instead, he runs into two rent-a-cop types who won't leave him alone. Things get heated, and boom, he ends up accidentally killing one and straight-up murking the other. Cassian dips to Ferrix, where he ropes in his adoptive mom, Marva, and her glitchy droid, and his homie Brasso to help cover it all up. He's also holding a super rare piece of Imperial tech, the Starpath unit, so he hits up his friend Bix to hook him up with a black market buyer. She agrees, but her jealous situationship Tim is getting major sus vibes. Meanwhile, back on Morlana 1, the head of security's like, let's pretend this never happened. But his bootlicker deputy, Cyril Karn, is not letting it go. He traces Cassian's ship, tracks it to Ferrix, and finds out Cassian's from some remote planet called Canary. Cue flashback. Little Cassian, aka Casa, is vibing in the jungle with his tribe. A ship crashes nearby and he joins a search party, but tells his lil sis to stay behind. And that's where we leave off. Tim's still salty about Bix and Cassian, so he snitches and reports Cassian to Primor Security, who already had a warrant out for him. Cyril teams up with Sergeant Linus Mosk, who's just as intense to go hunt Cassian down. Meanwhile, Cassian's droid gives him and Marva the heads up about the warrant, so Cassian starts prepping to dip off the planet. At the same time, Luthen Rael, aka the mysterious buyer Bix was dealing with, pulls up to Ferrix to snag that Starpath unit. And in a flashback, young Casa and his squad find a crashed ship near this creepy, abandoned mining site. They go investigate, but when one of them gets killed by a crew member, the tribe claps back, takes the guy out, and bounces. Casa? He stays behind to poke around the ship. Luthen touches down on Ferrix and links up with Cassian in this sketchy, abandoned factory. At the same time, Cyril and Mosk show up with a squad of Primor officers. They try to get info out of Marva, but she's not having it. Cyril then picks up a transmission between Cassian and her mother's droid, and figures out exactly where he is. Cassian's ready to sell the Starpath unit and get off the planet, but Luthen tries to convince him to join the rebellion instead. He's impressed by how often Cassian's managed to mess with Imperial ships and get away with it. When the officers raid the factory, Cassian and Luthen escape through a speeder hangar and even manage to knock Cyril down in the process. Bix finds out Tim betrayed Cassian and runs to help, but gets stopped by the officers. Tim tries to step in and ends up getting shot and killed. Meanwhile, Brasso sabotages the Primor transport pod and blows it up. Luthen and Cassian escape Ferrix, while Cyril and Mosk are left asking for an emergency pickup. In a flashback, we see Marva and her husband Clem scavenging the crashed ship on Canary. They find young Casa and decide to take him with them, worried the Republic would never let him live if they found him. Luthen takes Cassian to Aldani and offers him a spot on a rebel mission, a full-on heist. Cassian's hesitant at first, but eventually agrees. Luthen tells him to use a fake name with the crew, so he goes with Clem. Vel, the leader of the rebel group, introduces him to the rest of the squad, but keeps Luthen's involvement under wraps. Their plan is to steal the entire payroll from an Imperial sector. They're hitting a key Imperial supply base and timing the escape with a rare celestial event in Aldani's sky, because their getaway ship is way too slow for a clean exit otherwise. Over on Coruscant, Luthen is playing double life. He's undercover as an antiques dealer and meets with Senator Mon Mothma. They talk about how hard it's getting to keep their anti-Empire efforts secret. Meanwhile, Cyril, freshly fired and humiliated, has to move back in with his mom. And at the Imperial Security Bureau, Lieutenant Dedra Miro pushes to take control of the Ferrix case, but runs into resistance from her peers and higher-ups. On Aldani, Cassian, still going by Clem, keeps his past to himself, which doesn't exactly earn him any trust from the rebel crew. Tarman leads the team's training for the big heist, pushing Cassian and the others hard to get ready. As they make their way to the Imperial garrison, Cassian finally admits he's just a paid mercenary. Vel decides to stay focused and deal with that little detail after the mission's done. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Gorn, an Imperial officer secretly working with the rebels, continues helping them from the inside. Back on Coruscant, Cyril's stuck figuring out his next move while living with his mom. Mon Mothma starts a new charitable foundation, but things at home are rocky. Her husband's distant, and her daughter's not exactly supportive. The ISB is also ramping up. Supervisor Blevin takes over a hotel on Ferrix to use as the new ISB HQ, but his rival, Deidre Miro, and her assistant Hirt are starting to piece things together. Realizing the rebels might be pulling off a coordinated string of thefts targeting Imperial weapons and tech. Meanwhile, Luthen is back in his shop, stressing and waiting for word from Vel and her crew. With Gorn's help, the rebels sneak into the garrison by pretending to be an escort squad for Commandant J-Hold Behaz, who just happens to be Gorn's boss. They take Behaz's family hostage and force him to open up the vault where the Imperial payroll is stored. Everything's going smoothly until Imperial forces catch on. A shootout breaks out. Taramyn and Gorn don't make it. Cinta is stuck behind, so only Cassian, Skeen, Vel, and Namik manage to escape in the freighter. But during takeoff, a stack of credits isn't secured properly and ends up crushing Namik. They rush to the nearby planet Fresno to try and save him. While Vel is focused on Namik, Skeen pulls Cassian aside and suggests they ditch the mission and split the credits between just the two of them. Cassian sees right through it and shoots him on the spot. He tells Vel what happened and makes it clear he just wants to take his cut and bounce. Before he leaves, Vel gives him Nemik's manifesto, honoring Nemik's final wish. Back on Coruscant, the ISB scrambles to figure out how to respond to the heist. Meanwhile, Luthen gets word about the job and quietly celebrates. Back on Coruscant, Cyril lands a new desk job at the Bureau of Standards. Pretty much the definition of soul-crushing. Meanwhile, Colonel Wolf Yularen announces that the ISB now has more power to spy and punish as they see fit. Deidre gets called out by Blevin for digging through Imperial files without permission, but she defends her work and ends up getting control over the Ferrix investigation. At Luthen's shop, his assistant Clea secretly tells Vel to track down and kill Cassian. He knows too much about Luthen's identity. Mon Mothma meets up with her old friend Tay Kolma, a banker she trusts, and asks for help sneaking access to her family's money without raising red flags. Meanwhile, Cassian returns to Ferrix to pay off debts and check in, but the vibe is way off. The locals blame him for the Imperial crackdown, and stormtroopers are everywhere. Seeing them brings back memories of his adoptive father Clem, who was hanged by clone troopers during a protest years ago. Cassian tries to convince Marva to leave with him, but she's had enough of running. She wants to stay and fight. Cassian ends up on the beachy planet of Niamos, living under the alias Keef Gurgo. But even there, trouble finds him. While heading to a store, he gets randomly arrested by a shore trooper and slapped with a 6-year prison sentence. For basically nothing. Cassian gets shipped off to Narkina 5, which looks like paradise, but is actually a brutal island prison, where inmates are forced into non-stop factory work. He's assigned to a unit managed by Kino Loy, a no-nonsense prisoner who keeps everyone in line and explains the system. Cassian spends his days assembling parts with other inmates under strict rules and constant pressure. Meanwhile, Vel and Cinta head to Ferrix to find him. Marva's health is declining fast, and Bix, desperate for answers, tries to reach out to Luthen. He doesn't respond. Too risky with all the Empire surveillance going on. Instead, Luthen bounces from Coruscant and pays a visit to Saw Gerrera, trying to convince him to back a raid on an Imperial power station at Spellhouse. Saw shuts him down. Back on Coruscant, Deidre questions Cyril about his Ferrix encounter, but brushes off his offer to help. She takes charge herself and heads to Ferrix, where she captures Bix and begins interrogating her. Deidre and her creepy science guy, Dr. Gorst, torture Bix to get info on Cassian and the Aldani heist. They suspect he was involved, but Bix doesn't crack, and they get nothing on the mystery caller, aka Luthen. Meanwhile, the ISB captures a rebel pilot from Krieger's squad. He spills the tea about a planned raid on the Spellhouse power station, giving the Empire a big heads up. Over in rich people drama, Mon Mothma meets up with Vel. Turns out they're cousins. She tells Vel to keep playing the role of a spoiled, clueless socialite to avoid drawing Imperial attention. Mon and Ty Kolma keep scheming in the background, trying to move money to support the rebellion without getting caught. Back at Narkina 5, Cassian's prison unit hits a breaking point. One of their own, Ulaf, an elderly inmate just days from release, suffers a massive stroke. A prison medic, Dr. Rossiv, straight up euthanizes him. But the real shock? Rossiv confirms the worst rumor. Prisoners who finish their sentences are just shuffled to another floor. No one actually gets out. And when word of this slipped, the Empire wiped out a whole floor to silence it. That's the final straw. Cassian and Kino realize the only way out is to break out, and Kino's finally in. Cassian kicks off the prison break by busting a water pipe, short-circuiting the electrified floor. With the security system down, the prisoners finally fight back, overpowering the guards and taking over the facility. Kino grabs the intercom and delivers a banger of a speech, rallying all the other floors to join the rebellion. Chaos erupts, in a good way, and the prison is in full uprising mode. But just when things are looking up, Kino drops the heartbreaking truth. He can't swim. So while everyone dives into the ocean and makes their escape, Kino stays behind. Cassian swims with the others, eventually making it to land. Elsewhere, Mon Mothma meets Davos Skulden, a shady but powerful guy who could help her with her financial problems. But when he says he wants her daughter to meet his son, a subtle setup for an arranged marriage, Mon nopes out of the deal. Meanwhile, we find out ISB supervisor Lonnie Jung is actually working as a mole for Luthen. They meet in secret where Lonnie spills the latest Imperial info. Marva passes away, and Ferrix starts prepping for her funeral. Dedra, being the schemer she is, allows it to happen, hoping Cassian will show up and walk straight into a trap. Vel hears about Marva's death and checks in with Clea, only to find out Mon Mothma is seriously considering marrying off her daughter to Davos Skulden's son, just to get rebel funding. Meanwhile, Cyril finds out about the funeral from his buddy Linus Mosk and starts making plans of his own. Over on the rebellion side, Saw Gerrera is ready to help Krieger with the Spellhouse raid, but Luthen tells him to back off, revealing that the ISB already knows and it's basically a setup. On his way back to Coruscant, Luthen gets stopped by an Imperial patrol, but pulls off a sick escape move, taking out TIE fighters and a tractor beam like it's nothing. Cassian and Melshi, now free thanks to their Caridian friends Dewey and Freedy, make it to Niamos to grab Cassian's stuff. That's when Cassian finds out about Marva. Heartbroken, he and Melshi split up, each ready to spread the word about the Empire's prison horror show. Cassian heads back to Ferrix for Marva's funeral and finds out Bix is being held by the Empire. Dedra and the local garrison are setting a trap. They're hoping Cassian shows so they can finally get answers about Axis, aka Luthen. But plot twist, Luthen's also there, planning to kill Cassian before he can spill any rebel secrets. Vel and Cinta are in on it too. Meanwhile, the ISB completely wipes out Krieger's crew during their attack. On the political side, Mon Mothma's daughter Leda gets introduced to Davos Skulden's son, which is wild considering these kids are barely teenagers. Back at the funeral, Marva's droid plays a recorded message from Marva, and she basically tells everyone to rise up and fight the Empire. That speech sparks a full-blown riot. In the chaos, Cassian breaks Bix out, and Cyril randomly shows up just in time to save Dedra from getting wrecked. Cassian later meets up with Brasso and some crew at a shipyard, convincing them to take Bix somewhere safe. Then he sneaks onto Luthen's ship and hits him with a mic drop offer. You can either kill me or take me in. Luthen just smirks. And in a post-credits scene, turns out those parts the prisoners were building on Narkina 5 are for the Death Star.